Hello everyone, I am the Man Kirby. Welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this 14th season premiere of the Brewery, I'll be taking my take on a commander from Avatar The Last Airbender, Fire Lord Azula. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel and no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You could also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with the logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Azula is a 4/4 human noble with Firebending 2 for 1 generic, 1 blue, 1 black, and 1 red. She has an incredibly fun triggered ability that copies any spell you cast while she's attacking. This means that anything you cast during your attack step after choosing Azula as an attacker, but before passing priority for opponents to choose blockers, combat damage step, which means right before combat damage will be dealt, so keep that in mind, and end of combat step, which is a kind of cleanup step for the combat phase. Anything you cast in that window will be copied, so any copied permanent spells will become token copies. This allows for some insane combat tricks even after you dealt combat damage, since Azula is an attacker even during the end of combat step. To that end, the deck is very straightforward. I chalked it full of instants and permanents with flash. And even then, since the deck does need some utility pieces that don't have flash, you can't go wrong with Leyline of Anticipation in here. That'll just take care of everything, especially if you play it on turn 0. In any case, let's see what I included that already has flash. I feel like Lochmere Serpent and Ancient Stone Idol will be some cards that get slept on for Fire Lord Azula, since they're not as strong at first glance as all of the possible cards to run in this deck. But in the case of the Idol, being able to copy a massive 12/12 Trampler potentially for free is nothing to scoff at, especially since it replaces itself with a 6/12 Trampler when it dies. The Serpent is a 7/7, which is small compared to the 12/12, but it has built-in unblockability, built-in recovery, and built-in card draw. This thing is very difficult to get rid of. Lindblum Industrial Regency and Vivi's Persistence are some other fun cards I love that I'm happy to include here. Sending Lindblum on an adventure is even easier thanks to Azula's Fire Breathing 2, so you only need that 1 extra mana. Then you get 2 Black Mage tokens for the price of 1. All on a card that doesn't take up a slot on the deck, since you could just play the land afterwards in your post-combat main phase. Vivi's Persistence is the busted one for Black Mage production though. It costs 2 mana, which is paid for with Azula's Fire Breathing. Then, since she's our commander, whenever she attacks, she can pay 2 generic to recover it. So we could attack with Azula, pay 2 generic to get this card into our hand, then use her 2 red mana to cast it. It'll get copied, getting us 2 Black Mage tokens each time. Tokens that will continue to trigger exponentially by casting Vivi's Persistence itself. Definitely an all-star in this deck. Speaking of burn, Fated Firepower is another amazing spell to cast during combat. Keep in mind that the X value for spells are copied when you copy the spell. So even if you only paid 2 for X, you'd get 2 copies of this enchantment, each with 2 fire counters on it. So you'd be dealing 4 additional damage total, all for just 5 mana. You can obviously sink however much mana you want. This was just an example to show how powerful this card is here, even with humbler values of X. We can also boost damage thanks to Dueling Wapier, Inventor's Axe, and Mirren Bane Splitter. I bet you didn't expect these, huh? Well, neither will your opponents. Azula's Firebending is enough to cast this without worrying over mana. They then enter attached to Azula, making her even more powerful. Not only that, but since the trigger is on entering, the token copies will also enter attached to Azula. She will be able to deal massive amounts of damage. This is why Double Trouble is another card in the 99. With enough power, quadrupling Azula's power might be enough to kill an opponent right then and there. Don't forget what I mentioned in the intro. If Azula isn't blocked, then in response to combat damage you can cast these pump effects and kill an opponent out of nowhere. This is why Rogue's Passage and Secret Tunnel are in here. Not only do they not take up a slot in the deck, but they really help us out with guaranteeing Azula gets through. Secret Tunnel requires another attacker with the same type, but Azula being a human means that won't be so hard to do. Especially if we're cloning her with either Sakushima of 1,000 Faces, Sakushima the Imposter, Spark Double, Irenicus' Vile Duplication, Ember Island Production, and Quantum Misalignment. Azula is such a busted commander to copy not just because of her fire bending, but because of that attack trigger that copies spells. If we sing in with multiple copies of Azula, then any spell we cast during combat is just duplicated that many times. Copying spells multiple times is so much fun that Errant, Street Artist, and Twinning Staff are amazing and includes regardless. The staff doesn't have flash, but, like I mentioned earlier, some cards shouldn't be excluded just because they can't be innately cast at instant speed. Especially since the staff allows us to copy any instant or sorcery spell on its own too. While Errant having Flash is amazing, we can't copy it due to the legend rule, which is a bummer. However, that's just fine for cards like Mystical Teachings and Waterlogged Teachings. The second one doesn't even take up a slot in the deck if you aren't greedy and use it as a land if you miss your land drop. Being able to tutor for Errant or any other key instant or card with Flash is pretty strong, especially when either of these are cast during combat when Azula attacks. So much so that since you copy these spells, you can use one copy to get the other, and with the recent bracket updates, these tutors do not raise the deck to bracket 3. This is a bracket 2 deck, by the way. Malleable Imposter, Mocking Doppelganger, Stunt Double, Waxen's Shaped Thief, and Calidus Assassin are some more clones, but these have built-in Flash. While none of these can copy Azula, it doesn't matter if they're able to copy the best creature in play. Not only that, but you'd be copying that creature twice thanks to Azula. Something interesting I managed to do playtesting this deck was casting Waxen's Shaped Thief while I also controlled Twinning Staff. Thanks to that and Azula, I copied the Shaped Thief twice, and then I had the copies and the original enter as copies of Twinning Staff, giving me a total of 4 staffs in play. Absolute insanity, I love it. Alexi's Cloak, Silver Shroud Costume, and Mithril Coat are more amazing spells with Flash, especially for the aggressive nature of this deck. Being able to protect Azula at instant speed is amazing, but being able to copy these spells in order to protect another creature is even better. Mithril Coat suffers from legendary status, but at least one is enough to protect our commander. Sure, Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Champion's Helm are still included, but the Silver Shroud Costume gives unblockability, which is super important for Azula and any potential Azula clones we have. Speaking of clones, one more super fun card in this deck is Elminster's Simulacrum. Yes, this is an instant. Yes, we can copy this while Azula is attacking. Does it cost 6 mana to cast? Sure, but with Firebending 2, we only really need to keep 4 mana up. And then we can copy our opponent's best creatures twice. I love this card and I love it even more here. Cutting Night Bonder makes it even easier to play with Azula since it reduces the generic cost of our spells with Flash, and since it has Flash itself, copying it makes our Flash spells cost even less. On top of that, it makes them uncounterable, so if we controlled Leyline of Anticipation, even our instants would be uncounterable. Etali Primal Storm is the last card I'm going to discuss in this section because, even though it doesn't give Flash or anything like that to spells, it does change the timing of when those spells are cast. We cast them when the ability resolves, meaning that we're casting them during our attack step, which is precisely when Azula is also attacking. Therefore, those spells we're stealing from the top of everyone's deck will get copied too. Absolute insanity. This is such an amazing mid-game card that takes us to the late game before anyone else. Okay, so these were all or most of the fun cards in the deck. Obviously, we can also make the most of the fact that we can also double up on interaction too. To that end, I'm running Eaten by Piranhas, Fresh Start, Amphibian Downpour, Observed Stasis, Chaos Mutation, Necron Deathmark, Nowhere to Run, and Scarring Memories. The auras are especially brutal when opponents block with their best creature, especially when trying to use them to get rid of Azula in combat. However, if you attack with Azula into a board with beefy blockers, that might put opponents uneasy since they might expect the interaction if you're not only keeping open mana, but have 2 mana in your pool via Firebending. If they risk it for the biscuit, punish them with a Fresh Start. Nowhere to Run is another heavy hitter since it not only gives -3/-3 to a creature when entering, but it allows us to hit creatures with Hexproof and Ward. Necron Deathmark getting copied means we're also getting a relatively powerful creature at 5/3 left on the board, and multiple times too. Scarring Memories, having them also discard cards is just brutal. Dictate of Erebos is an amazing card to flash in during combat. You can sort of coax blockers if you really needed to. Then, after blocks have been chosen, flash this in response to the combat damage step. Then, any creature you had die in combat will make opponents sacrifice multiple creatures for it, since you'll have 1 extra copy of it minimum in play. I already love this card, and in this deck I love it even more. Chaos Warp and Desecrate Reality can get rid of any permanent though, which is equally important as getting rid of creatures. Yeah, we want to swing into empty boards, but sometimes Maze of Ith type lands need removing, along with any annoying enchantment. Speaking of, Hullbreaker Horror is absolutely backbreaking in its own right. Now imagine multiples of it. Getting rid of any non-land permanent that irks you just by casting a spell. Well, multiple non-land permanents if you have additional copies of the Horror. Last but not least are an Offer You Can't Refuse, Swan Song, Counterspell, Countersquall, and Negate, which is clearly the deck's counter magic suite. If an opponent were to try to interact with us during combat while Azula is attacking, we'll be able to copy these counterspells, making it harder to counter our counterspells. However, these are just overall important to have in the deck regardless, and we can recover them thanks to Mystic Sanctuary and half of the deck's 9 fetch lands. There's plenty of instant speed card draw effects in the deck, but there's also some synergistic ones which we'll see in a bit. Actually, let's see the card advantage effects now. The deck's running Fairy Mastermind, Slither Wisp, and the Blue Spirit. Of these, only the last one doesn't have flash, but that's fine since it's legendary. The Slither Wisp is the best one here though, since it also has opponents lose life whenever we cast another spell with flash. Having multiples of these in play add up, just like those Black Mage tokens we saw earlier. Card draw and life loss, definitely an auto-include in this deck. The fairy requires a bit of setup since it triggers whenever an opponent draws their second card, but that tends to happen frequently, so it's not a dead card here. Plus, it only costs 2 mana to cast, and we can just sink mana into it to make the board draw cards anyways. The Blue Spirit is another flash enabler for our first creature spell each turn, which is amazing when Azula is attacking. And its trigger isn't once per turn, so we can draw as many times as a non-token creature we control enters during combat. Omen of the Sea and Enduring Curiosity are both enchantments with flash. While the Omen might seem underwhelming, we're still scrying 2, then drawing 1 twice for just 2 blue mana thanks to Azula. Then we could filter our top deck later on if we needed to. Sure, it's no Ancestral Recall, but it gets the job done. Speaking of, can you imagine if this was neither banned nor on the reserve list? What an absolutely insane card for Azula, but I digress. Enduring Curiosity is amazing in an aggressive deck like this one, so imagine having another one in play when we're attacking. Last but not least is Gush. Not only can we cast this for free by just bouncing 2 islands, but it's only when we cast it, not when it resolves. So we can bounce 2 islands when Azula is attacking and draw at least 4 cards. Absolutely insane one-shot card draw effect in here. It's no Ancestral Recall, but Azula makes it close to be. Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel are included due to the potential to draw into a bunch of cards once we have our engine going. The Mana Rock also doubles as mana acceleration along with Soul Ring. Unfortunately, the deck isn't green, so we have to make do with what we can. Which is why Wayfarer's Bauble, Navigation Orb, Sword of the Animus, Bitterthorn, This is Animus, and Sword of Hearth and Home are also in here. The equipment are the best ones though since the deck is very aggressive, but also has the potential of unblockable creatures. Sword of Hearth and Home is particularly useful in that department since it can give Azula protection from white and green, hopefully making her unblockable in that regard. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running all 3 Shock lands, all 3 Surveil lands, all 3 Opponent lands, Xander's Lounge, Exotic Orchard, Reflecting Pool, and Command Tower, as well as 3 of each basic land for the basic land mana accelerants in the deck. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. Same with increasing the deck's bracket, since this is a bracket 2 deck. This brews is an idea of how to build around Fire Lord Azula. Fortunately, Avatar The Last Airbender was a slam dunk of a set, just like Final Fantasy was. That was to be expected though, since Magic is better suited from collaborating with fantasy-adjacent IPs. But that conversation is neither here nor there. In any case, if you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Bandit Kirby, and happy brewing.